is I have experience of managing 24 heart transplant patients. And second is there is no clear-cut guideline for the management of this, and most of these are consensus statements. Yeah. So as we are running short of time, I will just quickly go through. Please, yeah. Right. So this is the patient who is at our ICU shifted from the OT, and this is how it looks. We have nitric oxide delivery system. We monitor arterial blood pressure, PA blood pressures. We monitor cardiac output by both flow track, which uses the arterial pressure waveforms, and again also the Swan-Ganz catheter, Ciccio Swan-Ganz catheter. And actually this is more important because we are actually more worried about the right side of the heart, because this donor heart is acquainted to work against the normal PVR, and suddenly this heart is getting exposed to the high PVR of the recipient, and so that's why right heart is the more vulnerable post-transplant. And this Ciccio Swan-Ganz catheter, which is a gold standard for monitoring the cardiac output, which gives us the exactly right side of the cardiac output. We monitor CVP, and our goals are CVP should be between 8 to 12 mm of Hg, so they should be adequately filled but not the overfilled. Mean arterial pressure should be more than 70 mm of Hg. Heart rate should be 100 to 110 per minute. Pulmonary arterial pressure should be less than 1/3 of the systemic blood pressure. Cardiac index should be more than 2.1 liter per minute per meter square, and urine output should be more than 0.5 ml per kg per hour. So this is recently we did the transplant, and after 12 hours, this is the echo. You can see LV is very brisk. There is mild minimal RV dysfunction, and we extubated this patient at the 11 hours. But think if we have released the cross clamp in OT, and this is the heart. So this is actually one of the patient's echo, and after releasing cross clamp, heart didn't pick up. So it was not ejecting at all. So we give him rest on CPB for almost 3 hours, but still it was not picking up. So what to do? What is this? So this is called early graft dysfunction. By definition, it develops within the first 24 hours. It will be divided into two: primary graft failure and secondary graft failure. Primary graft failure is when there is no secondary cause. So it is mainly by the ischemia reperfusion injury. So it because of during the preservation or during transport, whatever the injury happens to the graft, or maybe donor will be on very high inotropes. So it can be of LV or RV, or it can be both combined dysfunction. It is a leading cause of mortality for first 30 days, and incidence is varies from 2.3% to 28%. Secondary graft failure, when you have definite secondary cause present like hyperacute rejection, high pulmonary vascular resistance, and RV getting failed, kinking or narrowing of any anastomy like IVC or SVC, then can be bleeding and cardiac tamponade. So these are the cause of the secondary graft failure. So ISHLT has given definition in 2014 that what is the primary graft failure. So for LV, it is divided into two: mild, moderate, and severe. And mild when ejection fraction is less than 40%, when patient is adequately filled, and cardiac index is less than 2, and patient is only on mild inotropes. When inotropes goes up and requires IUBP, it's called moderate, and still patient is unstable, and when patient requires mechanical security supports like ECMO, LVAD, or BiVAD, it's called severe LV primary graft dysfunction. For right-sided, it is like CVP will be more than 15. PCWP less than 15 mmHg, so it's not the LV side of problem, it's mainly RV side of problem. With cardiac index is less than 2, and patient requires need of RVAD. So this is right ventricular primary graft dysfunction. So risk factors, it can be donor related, like if donor is old age or marginal donor, or if donor is on very high inotropes or vasopressure. It can be recipient related risk factors like old age recipient post LVAD or post ECMO, or surgical procedure related risk factors like prolonged ischemia time, and female donor and male recipient, or any weight mismatch more than 30% underweight of the donor. So these all are the risk factors for primary graft dysfunction. So management, as Dr. Arvind discussed very well, same inotropes, dobutamine, adrenaline, milrinone, isoprenaline if patient has low heart rate, and vasopressors like norepinephrine and vasopressin. We use both, and because both act on the different receptors and they have additive and synergistic effect. Recently, it's a role of levosimendan also proven in primary graft dysfunction. If inotropes fails, then treatment goes for the mechanical security supports like IUBP, but IUBP can just increase the cardiac output by 5% in most of the cases, maximum can go up to 30%. So most of the time it is not useful in this primary graft dysfunction. Then VATS, so it can be centromech of right side, left side, or both. And we have then VA ECMO. So VA ECMO can be both, it can be central or peripheral. Central, we need to keep the chest open, so there will be risk of infection. Peripheral chest can be closed, but there can be risk of limb ischemia, and LV vent has to be put. So what I saw the video clip before echo clip that one of our patient whose heart didn't pick up after opening the cross clamp. So we put that patient on the VA ECMO, and after 24 hours of support on VA ECMO, on 50% of the flow on the load to the ventricle, we can see that his LV has been improved. Now it is around 20 to 25%. And at the end of the 6 days of the on the VA ECMO, his LV has become completely normal. RV is also looking great. So we weaned this patient ECMO on the 6th day, and he got discharged on the 15th day. He is now 5 years post heart transplant. He is doing absolutely fine. He is a shopkeeper at one garments shop at Surat. So there are a number of studies we have seen that what are the effect of VA ECMO on early graft dysfunction or primary graft failure. So 30 days survival was 80% in ECMO group versus 98% non-ECMO group. And most of the studies have concluded that despite more complications and prolonged ICU or hospital stay, the short-term and medium-term survival remains favorable for those placed on the VA ECMO. So any patient with primary graft dysfunction when heart is not picking up, low cardiac output, instead of wasting the time on just keeping on high inotrope, better to go on the VA ECMO because survival is quite favorable. The studies have compared VA ECMO versus VATS, and most of the studies have concluded that ECMO appeared to result in better clinical outcomes compared to VATS because ECMO was superior to RVAT for acute RV failure. And recent studies have proved that the type of the device used for support did not affect survival. So it's still conflicting result, but still at our institute we prefer VA ECMO over the VATS. The secondary graft failure, I told it's because of some secondary causes there. So hyperacute rejection, nowadays it's uncommon because most of the time it's HLA matched donors. But if it happens, treatment is plasmapheresis and retransplant is the option. Surgical complications like bleeding and cardiac tamponade, repeated echo should be done and it should be tackled surgically. This is the most common. Pulmonary hypertension means high PVR and RV failure is the most common because donor heart is now exposed to high PVR, which that heart is not exposed before. So in our practice, almost in 20-30% of patients receive this pulmonary hypertension related RV failure. And this is very important and important slide to understand what is the pathophysiology behind that. So high PVR and pulmonary hypertension, which increases the RV afterload. So which decreases the RV cardiac output. Because of decreasing RV cardiac output, there will be increase in the end systolic volume, and that causes the increased volume overload, RV volume overload, which causes tricuspid regurgitation. Because of that, CVP will go up. And second thing happened is there will be interdependency of the RV and LV. So because of that, there will be septal shifts of the interventricular septum to the left side, and that causes a decreased LV filling. Because of that, LV cardiac output will also go down, and that causes systemic hypotension, and it decreases the mean arterial pressure. And if you see equation of renal perfusion pressure, it's a mean arterial pressure minus CVP. So here our MAP goes down because of decreased LV cardiac output, and CVP goes up because of RV volume overload, and ultimately renal perfusion pressure drop down, which decreases the urine output. Now decreasing urine output further increases the CVP. And CVP increases cause, and at that time, if we give fluid boluses for hypotension, that will also further increase our CVP. And increasing CVP further causes tricuspid regurgitation and increase RV volume load. So this is a vicious cycle. So it is very important to understand this vicious cycle and break this cycle early to prevent irreversible RV failure. And second vicious cycle also sets in like systemic hypotension, it decreases the right coronary perfusion pressure, and increase afterload increases the RV wall stress and increase the demand. So increased demand, decreased supply causes RV ischemia, and then again further decrease the RV cardiac output. And these are the two vicious cycles continuously moving on. So early to identify and treat that. So how to diagnose? So we can see very good echoes here. So LV is very brisk in the first right side of the video. So LV is big, RV is dilated, and septum is shifted to left side with the D shape of the ventricle. Lower side, it's a transesophageal echocardiography, RV inflow outflow view. We can say RV is not contracted well. There will be some tricuspid regurgitation. RV is dilated, and IVC diameter is more than 20 mm. So treatment, so as we know, this is because of increase in PVR, increase in pulmonary pressure, so decrease RV afterload, decrease PVR by inhaled nitric oxide by 5 to 25 parts per million. Nitric oxide, a lot of advantages like it does not cause systemic hypertension. More waste all the agents we are used for the decreasing pulmonary pressure cause the systemic hypertension also. But here is it just decreases the PVR and not the SVR, and it also decreases the bed space ventilation and shunting. Then other pulmonary vasodilators like ambrisentan or sildenafil can be used, and optimize the ventilator settings to decrease the PVR. So we should avoid like hypercarbia, acidosis, hypoxia, which increases the PVR. Then second thing is increase RV inotropy, because this donor new RV has to work against the high PVR. So increase RV inotropy by inodilators like milrinone, dobutamine. Dobutamine will then be tachyphylaxis after 72 hours. Adrenaline low dose decreases the PVR. Isoprenaline can be used. Then optimizing of the RV preload. This is very important because as we have seen in the previous slide, there will be vicious cycle of increase in the CVP. So loop diuretics, bolus or infusion or sequential nephron blockade by adding the metalozone or potassium sparing diuretics. Early institution CRID. This is very important. Unless we take care of the volume overload, RV is not going to improve because it's a vicious cycle. So we should start the CRIT and ultrafiltration very early. Maintenance of mean arterial pressure and RV coronary perfusion pressure by vasopressin or noradrenaline. Here vasopressin has preference over the noradrenaline because vasopressin does not increase the PVR. Pulmonary vasculature does not have vasopressin receptors, and this is the advantage. Noradrenaline increases both PVR and SVR. So whenever there is high PVR RV dysfunction, vasopressin is preferred over the noradrenaline. We can give high dose of adrenaline, phenylephrine, and if patient has vasopressia, we can add methylene blue. Then maintenance of sinus symptom synchronous by cardioversion or pacemaker. And if all this fail medical therapy, then go for VA ECMO, Ayurveda, atrial septostomy. Next challenge comes the bradyarrhythmias. So it is because of sympathetic degeneration or sinus ischemia or recipient is on amiodarone. So your treatment is by IV inotropes, isoprenaline, theophylline or terbutaline. If all this fail, then permanent pacemakers if it is failed for more than 3 months. But in our 24 patients, we have never restricted permanent pacemaker implantation. Here one thing to remember is atropine neuro, paradoxically it can cause asystole and AV block. Tachyarrhythmias, earlier will be the atrial fibrillation, later will be the atrial flutters. The common causes will be again ischemia, degeneration, primary graft failure, rejection or inotropes. Treatment is by rate control by DC cardioversion or antiarrhythmics. We know the inotropes considered biopsy because ejection can also be presented as the arrhythmias. Things to remember is amiodarone should be used with caution because it can cause bradycardia and patient may require pacemaker, and amiodarone has long duration of effect like more than 3 months. So it can interfere with the tacrolimus level assessment. Beta blocker and calcium channel can be used with the caution. Adenosine can have exaggerated response and can cause asystole. Then here is always a fighting between the risk of rejection versus risk of infection. So if you give over immunosuppress, the patient, there will be risk of infection. If you under immunosuppress, there will be risk of rejection. So our management is typical triple therapy of immunosuppression. So we give steroids. So steroid problem with the steroids, it increases the WBC count and causes the neutrophilia. So it is interfere with the diagnosis with the infection. So we don't say high WBC with neutrophilia is always infection. It can cause hypercalcemia and hypertension. Mycophenolate mofetil can increase SGPT, can cause neutropenia and diarrhea. Sometimes so severe neutropenia, then we have to stop this drug. And tacrolimus problem is renal dysfunction by renal vasoconstriction and tubular interstitial nephritis. It can cause hyperkalemia, hyperglycemia, and hypertension. So most of the post high transfer patients with hyperglycemia, hypertension because of steroids and tacrolimus. Then infection, they can be main. Risk factor starts from the day 0 when we give the immunosuppressants till the lifelong. Cumulative risk of 85% at 5 years, common in first 6 months. Whole range of pathogens, opportunity infections, most infections, cytomegalovirus, pseudomonas, pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, aspergillus, candida, pseudomonas, and mycobacterium tuberculosis. And our protocol is we prophylactically give broad spectrum antibiotics like piperacin, tazobactam, and teicoplanin, valganciclovir for the CMV coverage, cotrimazole for the pneumocystis pneumonia, and clotrimazole candid mouthful for the local application for the fungal candida infection. And donor culture and antibiotics as per sensitivity. Early extubation, that is the key, because if we extubate the patient early, he or she can participate early in the physiotherapy and can remove his or her secretions, early enteral feeding, and remove our invasive line as soon as possible. So most of our patients are stable by the day 6, they are off invasive lines. Last is the rejection. So it can be antibody mediated rejection or acute cellular rejection. So antibody mediated rejection is because of preformed or de novo recipient antibody against donor HLA antigens on the endothelial layer of the endograft. So this can be before itself, it can be newly generated antibodies, and that antibodies can activate the complement inflammatory pathway and damage the endothelial cells. In cellular rejection, it's a T cell mediated response, and T cell by direct or indirect allorecognition find out the donor foreign body cells and cause the rejection. So antibody mediated rejection in incidences which C4b positive graft dysfunction occurs in 27% of patients. And treatment here, it's because of antibodies. So removal and blockade of circulating antibodies by plasmapheresis and IVIG, corticosteroids and anti-thymocyte globulin, rituximab to depletion of beta lymphocytes, and ATG again suppress the T lymphocytes. And systemic anticoagulation important because as we have seen that it causes the endothelial damage and it causes the capillary level microthrombosis. Acute cellular rejection happens in 20 to 40% of the patient the first year after the transplant. Here patient can present the symptoms or patient will be asymptomatic, and on routine protocol surveillance biopsy this rejections has been found out. And treatment, if patient is symptomatic, then high dose corticosteroids and anti-thymocyte globulin and antibiotic prophylaxis should be given along with that because we are giving high dose of immunosuppressants. And repeat endomyocardial biopsy after 1 to 2 weeks. If patient is asymptomatic and if it's class 1R, then no treatment is required. This is very common in most of our biopsy report. We found class 1R acute cellular rejection, but patient was asymptomatic and we just closely observe them and don't give any extra treatment. If class 2R IV or oral corticosteroids optimizes and dose of immunosuppressants and change to others, like suppose patient is on azathioprine, switch over to mycophenolate mofetil. Class 3R definitely pulse steroid is indicated even the patient is asymptomatic, and repeat endomyocardial biopsy after 2 to 4 weeks. If still persists, consider ATG. So take home message, primary graft dysfunction is not uncommon and treatment is inotropes and early institution of VA, ECMO or VATS. RV dysfunction because of high PVR, and we should always be keep this in the mind. Any patient with rising CVP, hypertension, oliguria is a vicious cycle, and early diuresis should be instituted. Optimization of immunosuppressions by balancing the risk of rejection versus infection, and keep high index of suspicion for rejection. So repeated echo and endomyocardial biopsy. So it's a teamwork. So definitely, it's as Dr. Dhiren mentioned, it's a very dedication, because very dedication, hard work, sleepless nights. But when you see smiles on these patients, like who are before not able to sleep, before not able to eat, and when they are doing absolutely fine. So I feel that whatever pain we take, it's all worth. Thank you very much for patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Chintan. And